Okay, wait, there it goes. There we go. I'll at least start the recording and capture the latter half of the meeting. Just as a verbal note to the beginning of that recording, this is the July 15th meeting of the ROS WebTools Working Group, and we'll jump back in where we were. Yeah, sorry, bro.
The promotional hound in me wants to like quietly ask if I could spend 50 seconds and play that video again.
Yeah, I mean, feel free if you want to.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll just kick that up.
And yeah, well, that's going. If anyone else has any questions about the specs of the robot or about how it works, it'll be to add your own computer. You just plug in an Ethernet cable, and then the robot will provide power. We're trying to get it so that it provides either battery power, 12 volts, or 5 volts, so you can power most computers.
So yeah, so for anyone just joining us, this is the Rover Mini. It's Rover Robotics' latest product. We're launching a Kickstarter on September 1st, but it's a high-performance, low-cost robot targeted specifically at education and also with the potential for commercialization, because we designed this robot both to be easy to learn on and compatible with basically any existing like learning stack of sensors and software, but also to be high performance and reliable enough to actually work for end use customers. And it is the first robot of its kind that will ship with ROS2 as a default to kind of proliferate the latest and greatest in open source robotics hardware. So yeah, coming up, we will have a launch page on our website, roverrobotics.com, within the next week or two. And we have a Kickstarter going live on September 1st. So please check it out if you get a chance. And thank you for letting me do that again.
Yeah, thanks for the recap, Davis. I've now added to the meeting agenda, start the meeting recording is the first item. Yeah, process, fix, brain. Okay, so where were we before that interruption? I think we were talking about message definitions. Do we want to jump back into that, or did we want to talk briefly about the web deployment for Foxglove first?
Oh yeah, we can mention that. That's just more of an FYI. Okay. Sorry about the background noise here. Foxglove Studio has always supported a web build, but we only just recently actually deployed that. So we are still sort of mostly encouraging folks to download the actual desktop Electron app because it has a few more features like connecting to live ROS1 systems over TCP, which is something we can't do from the browser. But we're going to start sort of making the web build a bit more available and a bit more supported. So it's up there at studio.foxglove.dev. You can just open it and then connect straight to a ROS Bridge WebSocket connection or drag a bag in or anything you like. No, it's still needed.
Are you planning on either monetizing it eventually or keeping it free? And then if you keep it free, are you planning on doing like an app store or something? Or how do you guys plan on making money, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I think this came up last week too. So the main thing, so Foxglove Studio will always, as it is today, will always be a free open source product, and you know what we have published today will always be free. Where we're planning to charge is around team features. So logging into a team, having layouts that are shared among team members, being able to share views among team members, possibly getting into things like being able to add comments and metadata and stuff around, you know, data that you've recorded. So those are things that sort of become really interesting once you have, you know, companies and like 10 plus people working on the same project. But, you know, for people that want to use or download or run Studio, it's, that part will always be free. And you know, obviously it's open source. People are welcome to fork it and do whatever they like with it as well. On the kind of app store thing, we are building an extension kind of registry. We haven't really put any thoughts into, you know, whether people might want to like make commercial extensions or anything like that. It's certainly plausible, but for now, the extension registry will look a bit more like what you get from Visual Studio Code, where it's just, you know, you go to the sidebar and store whatever extensions you want. And in the early days, all of the extensions will just be sort of like, you know, free on GitHub if people have published them. yeah, couldn't rule out that there could be sort of like an app store model, but I would have to like see if people actually were interested in charging for extensions. But yeah, we do care a lot about the extension support because I think, like, you know, not under any delusion that Foxglove, the core product, will be able to solve 100% of everyone's needs. You know, we sort of like aim to solve 90%, and then you can, you know, do the other 10% with your own custom plugins for different visualizations or different data sources or, you know, different buttons and things like that.
So you're talking about maybe using Foxglove or some other solution for a Rover Robotics front end for the robots. I'm wondering if you have an open software stack and potentially a gazebo model for the robot, such that members of the community here could possibly help out with that effort before the release. It actually, you know, before someone can actually have a physical robot in hand.
Yeah, all of our driver code is up on GitHub. We don't have the gazebo model yet, but that's something that we're working on.
Okay, gotcha. Because I think you could definitely have a pretty solid workflow between a gazebo simulated, you know, Rover Mini, and hooking that up to a web interface in order to get you a lot of the way there before you can have a robot in hand.
Yeah,
that actually may be a nicer development workflow in terms of iteration without deploying to a bot.
Yeah, we're actually, so we're also part of the Navigation 2 work group, and that's what Steve is trying to switch everything to, is the Rover Mini for all the different example SLAM and different planners and stuff that go along with Navigation 2.
Emerson, you're more plugged into the community. What's the status of Gazebo? Is that like basically deprecated now, or I saw some blog posts saying people should?
Yeah, so Gazebo Classic is has had its final major release. Gazebo 11 is going to be supported, and it's going to go end of life 2025. So it's kind of in line with, no, it'll go on a little bit beyond Foxy. Yeah, unfortunately, the ROS and Gazebo releases don't line up in any meaningful way, but yeah, Gazebo 11 will last past the end of life for Foxy, so it's still relevant, but I think the majority of new feature development is going into Ignition Gazebo. And it looks like that's a complete rewrite in the same way that ROS 2 is, and I think I haven't used it much myself. Some reports I've heard is that it still feels like an early product. It needs some polish and bug fixing and stability work, but potentially, based on the new, you know, re-architecture, it has a lot of promise. That's what I can say. My understanding of the situation. Don't know if anyone else on the call has a different perspective.
No, I think that's right. The biggest change that I've seen, at least with the Gazebo Ignition, is they're changing the renderer essentially, so you can do like ray tracing and a lot more fancy graphics. Essentially, it looks a lot better.
Yeah. So the way I understand it is that the Ignition suite of libraries acts as a set of APIs. So you've got the Ignition rendering API, and you can plug in various rendering engines under that, rather than having something like, for example, Ogre in the original Gazebo be tightly tied into the core code. So if you wanted to write another renderer plugin, you could have a different graphics engine than the one that ships by default. Same with physics. Yeah, so that's my understanding. It's just more pluggable, so you can get some of these more advanced features by tossing something else in there.
Does anybody know it? Are they then trying to include the new open 3D render that was just announced like last week or whatever? Is that?
Oh, I don't know.
Because I noticed Open Robotics, at least the Twitter account, keeps talking about the Open 3D, this new renderer released by Amazon. It's a whole coalition, a bunch of people, but that'd be interesting. I didn't know that it was a plug and play type thing with the render.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that sort of like how ROS 2 is just much more API based, and implementations kind of go under these API layers. I think Ignition Gazebo is trying to do the same thing architecturally, but we'll need to maybe get some more experience with that in the room.
Just a kind of related question, but also related to the WebTools stuff. Has anybody ever looked into using Godot with ROS? Godot, like the game engine?
I haven't tried it, but I've thought about it.
Okay, I have too. And so Godot, what I've noticed is they have this HTML exporter where you can export the game to be hosted on a website or downloadable for people to install like a web app of your game. But if somebody were to write essentially a Band-Aid, right, to connect ROS to and Godot, I think you could do some really cool either simulation stuff with like a video game type thing that's input into ROS2, or just a visualization tool as well.
I've seen a lot of projects use Unity before for that. I've never seen one use Godot. How do you spell Godot?
Godot. Godot.
Okay.
Yeah, I think originally it was a joke about how their initial release took a really long time, and it's like that play waiting for Godot.
Funny.
Yeah, I definitely know a lot of projects use Unity, and some people try to do integrations with Unreal. I've seen ROS Unreal bridges, ROS Unity bridges. None of them are as mature as the like ROS Gazebo bridge, but that makes sense given that, you know, even though they're completely separated teams and projects, at least they're coming from the same organization.
What I really like about Godot is that it has the nodes in the publish and subscribe signal idea. It's just it seems like it's made for ROS2.
Yeah, it's a distributed pub subsystem also. I mean, same with Gazebo to an extent. Like it's also, you know, pub subsystem, just different type of transport. Yeah. So I guess the original start of that conversation there was Nick Davis. Once you have some Gazebo resources for the Rover Mini, we'll all be, or at least I'll personally be happy to see it. So, you know, whenever you got that, post some links.
And
cool.
We'll do that.
Something that would be a possibly interesting conversation for this group would be browser-based front ends for these simulators. You know, you could run the simulator natively somewhere and have a front end just like we're doing with, I mean, I assume, Adrian, that you've thought about this with Foxglove of hooking it up to the simulation, not just the live robot. AirSim. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've never used AirSim. I've just heard of it. I think used it a bit. John's used it a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, but given that this isn't a simulation working group, we'll probably pull us back to the message definition topic that we started to talk about. It sounds like it's pretty important for, you know, not having to, if you want to have, especially this no install, browser-based or Electron-based, which is an installation, but maybe you don't need to have ROS installed.
Yeah.
Being able to get access to your data in a meaningful way there without having to build it all in ahead of time needs to have this message definition thing. I think that would be really useful for us to have a conversation with the middleware working group, which is largely core Open Robotics team. William Woodall, it runs it. And my understanding is he generally doesn't have the meeting if there's no agenda items. So something we could do is propose a topic, and at least I can show up there, if not more of us.
Can we?
Yeah, I just posted.
Yeah. How do you? Is that an open meeting, or do we?
Yeah, it's an open meeting. It's on the ROS events calendar. I don't have the link off the top of my head or off the top of my keyboard, but we've got the 7/28 meeting would be 2 weeks from now. We just missed this last one yesterday.
Okay.
But we could say, just propose an agenda item of this.
What about we could do a like GitHub issue, or is there any sort of like issue tracker, or is any of this documented?
There are definitely issue trackers. If you go to github.com/ROS2/ROS2, that's sort of the top level issue tracker for the project that tracks, you know, ROS2 spanning features, which this might be. Then you know, you've also got individual issue trackers on every single one of the micro repos that makes up the whole project.
Yeah, I think it is. There's actually two probably related issues that are worth discussing. One is I think, like you said, is the message definitions is probably more relevant to talk with the middleware group, because it sounds like we need to fix it, upstream in ROS. And
I think it's a feature, that we need to build into the core. And so getting some feedback from that core team and some guidance would get us farther along the way there. It's not too far outside my charter, so it's possibly something I could work on, but I'm not sure how to approach it.
We can do a write-up, a Google Doc or something, just kind of explaining how we see the issue as a regression from ROS1 and some potential solutions. One of the issue is this thing around being able to like dynamically request message definitions from a running node so that we don't need them in advance. The other thing that might be more worth discussing with this group is the ROS. Actually, you guys have looked into this more than I have, but the ROS2 web bridge or WebSocket server, as written in Node.js, it sounds like it's not a great kind of user experience for someone setting that up. Like the ROS1 web bridge, you just install the node and run the node, and now you have a WebSocket server running. But the ROS2 one sounds like, you sort of have to have this Node.js dependency, and then you have to build it, you have to run npm install and a bunch of things. So we were sort of looking around at, I don't know who wrote that and how much effort there is behind it, and whether there's kind of context on like why the decision was made to move away from that being in Python and just being sort of like easier to install for typical ROS folks. I don't know if anyone has context on that.
Yeah, we don't have Jihoon on the call, who has a lot of context about the existing tools. Is anybody here familiar with ROS2 Web Bridge? Sounds like not. Theoretically, there's not like a fundamental problem with there being a Node.js package, although I don't know that right now, like today, Colcon knows how to build a Node.js package, but in theory, it should be able to. It's meant to just be a build manager that calls builds for various types of projects. Someone's been working on a cargo build for Rust, and right now, out of the box, it does CMake and Python setup tools-based packages. So why not a node-based package? You would just have to add a package XML file, but then beyond that, you shouldn't have to make it into a CMake project or anything.
I actually think it would be good if there was like a good documentation example. I'm not a super experienced Node.js developer. I've touched on it, but like it would be nice if there was like an example of how to build a ROS package in Node.js that sort of just works if you drop it into Colcon, and it should automatically do all the npm install and everything.
Well, yeah, what I'm saying is we can't write that tutorial because I don't think it does that yet, but there's nothing stopping it from doing that in theory.
There's also like, is it possible versus is it easy for people? Like, if the majority of ROS developers have never seen a node that's outside of C++ or Python, we're just adding, a whole stack of extra app dependencies that they need to install and a whole lot of stuff that seems like it just could be simpler if it was just,
Well, theoretically, you could have ROSdep do the installation. Like as long as you've got your package XML, ROSdep knows how to read it. There are, Node.js and npm packages in the native package manager for supported platforms.
Right. I guess it still would require, like, due to the limitations around message definition discovery, it would still require a potentially lengthy build step for anyone to use it with their custom message types. Whereas with the ROS1, the ROS bridge server, the Python thing, you just kind of install it and run it, and that's it, because all the message generation stuff already includes the definitions, and it can work with that.
But I think that these are two separate issues of like a Node.js package works automatically when you do a Colcon build versus that build takes a long time because it has to do something else in its package.json build steps.
Well, not just a long time, but the fact that you have to do it at all. So if you updated your message defs elsewhere, all of a sudden the bridge is broken until you git pull, sync up, run a build, restart it.
Yeah, what I mean is I think that's an issue regardless of whether Colcon can invoke that build or not. It's an independent problem. So we could tackle both in parallel even.
Yeah, I also think as someone who hasn't written a lot of nodes from scratch, I feel like there's some value in being able to just run a single file Python script that is a node and not have to set up all the build system for my node if all I want is like one Python file. And so if getting the bridge working means that I have to set up the whole build system and run a build so that the dependencies are correctly built as well, including the bridge, that makes it a little bit harder to just do a quick one-off script.
But you still have to have your dependencies to write that script in the first place, right? I think, again, it feels like a slightly separate issue of like, yeah, you want to write a one-off script that has, once you're already in the environment, that has your dependencies, right?
I guess I'm saying I was able to run like apt install ROS galactic something, and then Python 3 my node.py, and it just kind of worked.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't speak for ROS2, but in ROS1, we had this this conversation in ROS nodejs, right? So we have two different ways to do message parsing there. One is the gen-node.js method that Chris has implemented, which runs just like gen what is it, Pi or whatever, the message generation ones. And then there's the on-the-fly one, which was originally written by Brandon Alexander at Willow Garage, actually, and I ported that into ROS node.js. So that one is literally, you can deploy it on a robot where all you have is a folder with the message, like the original message files, and you don't need anything more from ROS than that, because it will just read those, parse them, create serializations. So that's pretty nice, because then you don't need to have a whole ROS build on the machine where you want to run it.
Yeah, connecting it back to the earlier topic about introspection of a live system, that is how Foxglove Studio works with ROS1 today. It connects, it discovers all the topics, it downloads the message definitions as it connects to topics, and it can parse everything on the fly. And we'd love to get to feature parity with ROS2 to say ROS2 works just as well as ROS1. That's our goal.
It doesn't parse them from the disk, though, right? It gets them from the public.
On the fly, yeah, over the network.
So this is kind of a naive question, but when I've built front ends for ROS1 in the past, I've used libjs. Is that what you guys are using for Foxglove, or have you kind of created your own custom implementation for doing the same thing?
We can drop the link in the chat. There's a number of repositories. Okay, I think they're up earlier for our.
You mean like the ROS1?
We don't have the ROS1 library published outside of our monorepo yet. We plan to move it as an independent package. That's the last one, but it's an all independent implementation.
We use ROSlib in with the WebSocket bridge currently, because we haven't made kind of our own TypeScript version of that. But for all other things, and even the message parsing and whatnot, we have our own separate, smaller modules and implementations of that. So ROSlib doesn't have TCP. It has a TCP piece, I think. Or it has the WebSocket and TCP, but it didn't work with Electron, so that's why we have a separate one for that.
One of the primary motivators of creating our own was to have pluggable transports. When you're running on the web versus running in an Electron app versus running directly in Node.js, how you create a TCP socket is different. And so we needed to be a pluggable system.
Okay.
But yeah, more like there's a few things we haven't extracted from the Studio monorepo, but we plan to, and most of those are just under the Foxglove org on GitHub. And we try and keep some semblance of a sane module structure where we believe something is useful as a standalone module, so that if you wanted to go build your own version of something, you can just take just the serialization piece or just the message definition parsing piece and run with that. We've had success with that approach in the past. It's what allowed us to also experiment with different tools and make our own. And so we hope that the same can apply for others. They can just take these individual pieces if they want to make their own, bag parsing tools or live connection tools or something that, go off and do your own things with your own transports, but you don't have to do the low level things.
Yeah, I guess I'll drop a link to just our. Well, actually, I'll drop a link to our npm.
Yeah, and I'll move those other packages out in
Yeah, probably
next week or two. The ROS2 stuff will be landing as we go. CDR or TPS, maybe, and then one level higher.
So it sounds like you guys will have like ROS2 support soon, but it because of these issues, it's not going to be like at parity with what ROS1 is, but and it would probably be going one solution might be going to like the core dev team for ROS2 to get.
Yeah.
Well, we absolutely will
resolved.
pursue that. We may have interim solutions where you have to hit like browse to files and load your own message definitions off disk, and they just need to match, and then push a little bit on the user for the moment.
Yeah.
I think we can work around.
And most visualizations, I mean, all of the standard message definitions are going to let you do images and point clouds and things like that.
It gets you a long way with the standard suite.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just if people have written their own message types, we will need to get those off disk to be able to pass them, which ruins the sort of experience of like just visit a website and connect to your robot.
Yeah, so I guess it comes down to, especially for these custom message definitions, the one you don't know at build time, they're really mostly relevant for like a graphing, plotting plugin, because any more specific visualizer would have built in that message type that it's expecting to see.
Yeah, I think plots and raw messages, right, on the main one.
Oh, just printing to a console or whatever.
Could one solution be just increase the number of messages that ship with ROS? Like if like we have our own custom messages, so that would be a problem for us. But if we had some way of shipping our custom messages with ROS, then it might get rid of that problem. Do you know how that process? Does anyone know how that process works right now?
We just published our first ROS message package. So Foxglove messages is a thing. It's just has a single message definition for creating an array of image markers. Mm-hmm. We'll expand it more with more advanced markers and other visualization related things. But yeah, is it a process you can go through, but there's still the inner universe of like, what do you get when you type like install ROS2 desktop? And then what do you have access to from apt? And we're in that second ring. When you type install ROS2 desktop, you're not getting the Foxglove messages.
As it stands right now, it's kind of whatever you have installed at the time that you build Foxglove, that's what you get in there, right?
No, so the nothing is compiled in. We don't use message generation or code generation, but we have created or we'll pull in all the message defs that are part of, I think it's Noetic for ROS1 and Galactic for ROS2.
Okay, so it's just whatever's in the desktop suite, that's what gets built in. Yeah.
That's it.
And that's, I mean, that in terms of talking about process, that's they call those variants, and it's just a meta package. So if you go to the ROS2 variants repo, which I'm linking right now, you'll see that there is a package there called desktop, and its package XML defines what gets pulled in.
I also was, there was a little bit of discussion of, can we just expand the common message types and people will be good to use those? I think definitely the more that there are, the more people can just do out of the box. That's great. But I think there will always be, especially for larger projects and companies, there will always be a need for custom types that represent more closely, what they're actually doing. If it's in a perception system, like a tracked object or something like that, that has custom metadata fields, whatever sort of custom thing, they'll need a type for it. And it would be great if any of the web tools, they can just sort of start using them without a bunch of additional setup.
Yeah, I think you can sort of chip away at it slowly that way, but it's never going to be a full solution. And then if you start thinking about the rest of the communication ecosystem, like services and actions, at least in my practice, I've always, even if there is like a standard serve that has the right fields, I always define a custom service definition just so that it's well typed to say like this has a semantic meaning of what it's for, not just what's in it. And in that case, like you just can't, because everyone's going to have the custom service definitions.
Yeah, and that limitation is going to apply to all of the tools that all of us in this group and beyond are working on.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, I think I'll agree, and I'm double motivated because I want message definitions for ROSbag as well, because I'm working on that project. And so I've added it as an action item here to attend the middleware working group, which is in 2 weeks. It'll be the day before our next meeting, so maybe we'll have an interesting conversation then can recap.
How if we were able to do that in a backwards compatible way, I mean, with your knowledge of how those working groups work, do you think that's something that could get intergalactic, or is it going to have to wait for 2022?
It probably is a humble feature, probably not something you could do in Galactic. If you were to support rolling, that's something you could do. But that's, given that rolling's a moving target, that's a difficult thing to support, possibly. Although useful, because then the moment the next distro comes around, it's just a snapshot of rolling and you're already ready to go on the day of the release. So yeah, I think given that it's probably a large new feature, it's unlikely that it would get backported into currently released distros. I could be wrong on that, but that's my instinct.
And that holds for the ROSbag 2 file format as well, most likely?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even with Foxy, we were trying to backport some of these. We made a bunch of performance improvements to ROSbag 2 so that it could actually keep up with realistic data streams. Yeah, and it was one hell of a project to try and do that. So we just have a branch that people can build from source that is compatible with Foxy and has these improvements, but there was no realistic way to get it into a distro.
Are you also planning to start the conversation ahead of that middleware working group by filing a ticket in the GitHub org? Or
yeah, I think that's a useful thing to do. I'll add as an action item to do like right now. I can today just file a ticket.
Okay, great, thanks. And maybe if you just want to send it out to the mailing list after you do that, so we can take a look and add thoughts.
Yeah, there might even already be one, but I can't remember. So I'll take a look and file one if there isn't, and whatever I find, I'll put the link here. Okay, so I think that puts us on. We know what to do next, and
would it help for us to do a write-up on that, Emerson, like a 1 or 2 page kind of?
Oh, like what we need out of. I feel like it'd be more useful to do a write-up potentially after we've had a bit of the technical conversation. But yeah, if you want to talk about, I could use more ammunition in terms of the use cases. I think that having that in writing to attach to the ticket, yeah, that would be useful.
Even for the technical discussion, I don't know, just a bit of a pre-read so that people.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I mean, I don't know any other people in the middleware group, but
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I think some in writing description of use cases, and I think that'll help inform how we'd want to approach it technically. That would be of a lot of value. So once I've pasted a link here, you could use that place to attach whatever you want to contribute to it.
Sounds good.
I think I'll write a pretty simple ticket to start, and that leaves it open to expansion. Okay, are there any other discussions we want to cover today? We don't have a lot of time, but I noticed Dheera, you joined us and would potentially like to talk about our ROSboard. Is 5 minutes enough time for you, or do you want to save it for the next time? Okay.
Should be enough. And I'm happy to go into more detail because I have some more things planned out that'll probably be done by next time. So, I think, I guess in terms of jumping on the bandwagon for like web visualization tools here, like that's always been sort of a pain point of mine. So, without really, I don't want to, since we only have 5 minutes, I'm not going to tell you all the backstory behind this, but this is like basically been a long-standing project of mine that I just recently revived. It is also, I guess, a web visualization tool for ROS topics. It's right here at my name /ROSboard on GitHub. So off the bat, it supports ROS2 and ROS3. I'm sorry, ROS1 and ROS2 at the same time. The whole idea here is you should be able to just literally just click on some topics and get some visualizations. So that's what this is all about. One of the things that I have been generally trying to do is try to make this like really mobile capable. So, you know, if you see on, I think my screen is blurring here, which I can disable. Yeah, so like basically this, this should be able to, you know, my phone got off the Wi-Fi here, but get back on. There we go. So there it is on the phone, and there we go. You know, 3 cameras streaming on a phone, web UI right there. So, you know, one of the things I really like to do is to be able to walk around with a robot and look at the occupancy grid, look at the map. So that's what this is about. ROSboard is a ROS node. So you just put it in your, you can run it directly if you want right off the repo, or you can install it to your robot, either in ROS1 or ROS2, and it'll just be a web server on your robot. You just pick up your phone, go to your robot's IP, port 8888, and you can just click on ROS topics. So I also do want to add, you know, publisher, you know, for, you know, being able to actually joystick the robot right off the phone, and a few other tools like that. Oh, by the way, this is also something I've always wanted is demessage, because sometimes, you know, like here's a random USB device. I'm going to plug it in, and you'll see that show up right there. So I know we had issues with like RealSense USB cables and things. So I want to see, you know, what else we might want to add to this. One of the cool things is like this is mostly, it's vanilla JS plus some jQuery. I want to actually get rid of the jQuery eventually, but I'm trying to keep this as vanilla as possible so that it can stand the test of time and not be subject to sort of JavaScript framework of the month type of issues. It's all BSD licensed. So yeah, I'm hoping to package this up, put it also in the build farm because it is a ROS node. And yeah, there's only thing is there's one configure script to either ROS1 or ROS2. It'll turn this in the ROS package. But if you don't want to use it as package, you can just use the run script. It'll just work. This makes use of ROSPy2, which is another library I wrote, which basically allows you to say import ROSPy2 as ROSPy and then use the ROS1 API to talk to ROS2. It's just like basically a polyfill for ROS2 that does the ROS1 type API. So that allowed me to actually make this ROS1, ROS2 compatible in literally 5 minutes. Just another plug for another tool I wrote. This is not a web tool, but this, in the spirit of remote debugging, you can actually, well, here, yeah, like a terminal here. So if you have ever wanted to SSH into a robot and, you know, I don't know, view point clouds in a web browser, you can do that with this. You can do cameras, you can do laser scans, you can do all sorts of stuff.
So those are visualizations inside the terminal?
Yes. So if you ever wanted to SSH into a robot remotely and view stuff, yeah, you can do that here.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So like basically, I mean, it even allows you to fall back. So this is actually using Unicode Braille dots to do the lidar points. And you know, sometimes you're on a really old terminal that doesn't support Unicode, and it actually does have a strict ASCII fallback. So yeah, it's like basically, I just want to make it like dead easy for people to visualize stuff. So yeah, that's my plug. ROSboard does support Lidar scans now. It does not yet support point cloud, but that's very high in my priority list to implement for like the next 2 weeks.
If you want to make an issue, I'd be more than happy to help out with that.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been looking at a few libraries. I know like there was Worldview, but Worldview was like React, so I need to like de-reactify it to use it. So I was looking at a couple of other ideas, but definitely, yeah, happy to take suggestions.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for showing us that stuff. Very cool project. I've never seen a camera visualization in terminal characters before.
Yeah. So ROSshow right now, I'm in the process of porting it to ROS2. You already see some evidence of that in the repo, but there's currently already preliminary support for ROS2, but I'm still working on implementing the verb command so that you can actually do ROS2 show some topic, and it should actually just show it, because that's possible in ROS2. That's not fully implemented yet, but also probably should be done within the next few weeks.
Great.
Dheera, I put a question in the chat there, but have you had a similar issue with dynamically loading ROS2 message definitions, or do you have a power step that's required, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I like, that's definitely an issue. So what I do with the ROSboard, right, is because it's actually running as a ROS node, it expects you to have sourced all your message files that you plan to be using. And as long as you do that, it can just deserialize them, because it actually just uses a proper ROS subscriber. It doesn't introspect. So as long as you're running it as a ROS node in the rest of your launch file, it should work just fine. So I wasn't actually intending on trying to solve that issue in that sense. But you know,
do you have to tell it? How do you tell it which types you want to be able to show, or is it dynamically discovering the like Python generated classes and loading those?
No, it's just doing a ROS topic list of its own. It's just doing the get messages and message types, whatever. And it's because like as long as you do, you know, source your devel setup.bash and run ROSboard as part of your dev environment or your robot environment, then you should have all your message files in it. I guess, yes, if you're going to view a ROS bag offline on some other machine that doesn't have the message files, yeah, I guess that could be a little bit of an issue. I was thinking of potentially having ROSboard scrape all of opt.ros and look for message files and then import them, like basically dynamically add them to the Python path. That might be something to implement for later. But since my personally, my initial use for this was less about ROS bags and more about being able to view robot data live. This was all less of an issue, but I do see there's a growing, you know, number of people who want to be able to view ROS bags on other computers than the robot itself, and so there might be some need to do that.
Cool. All right, I think we're at time for today, but we've got our next meeting on July 29th, and I'm looking forward to it then. It sounds like we've got a couple of things we're planning on doing in the meantime, so maybe we'll have some cool stuff to show for it. And we've also got the ROS2 TSC meeting today, so I will be reporting on this working group there. So they're aware of us, and we're actually going through a little conversation as to whether to make this a TSC official working group or not. I think we just need to take a quick vote, and I don't think anyone's opposed, so probably will be.
Are the TSC meetings open for like spectators or anything, or is that?
No, it's only for TSC members and their like immediate delegates, if they have that. Like my manager is technically the TSC member, but most of the time he can't make it, so I go.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen the meeting notes, but I hadn't seen like recordings or anything of them.
Yeah, they don't do it. I don't know exactly why, but they don't make the recordings publicly accessible. Sometimes there's presentations that they don't want to show publicly, but no. Anyways, thanks everyone for coming today. Really good discussion, lots of notes again, and some action items for next time. So,
I mean, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
It's great to meet you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Emerson. Talk to everyone later.
Thanks.